Today's first reading tells us there is no cure for the proud man's malady, since an evil growth has taken root in him. And so it is that we witness every day increasingly that evil growth taking deeper and deeper root in the heart of the world that so proudly flaunts all its evil before God, more and more, louder and louder. I'll never forget how surprised I was when presiding at one of my first funerals. While the readings were being read, I was thinking about what a humble, gentle woman the deceased was. The funeral readings very much spoke of meekness and gentleness, etc. Then the eulogy was being presented, and her daughter kept repeating over and over about how proud her mother was of her and of this and of that. I was shocked to see how within one generation a family had gone from humility to pride. Pride, the source of original sin, has now so enveloped the world that I think it is safe to say that the world is now totally blinded by it. Brothers and sisters, if we are proud, then we are not humble. If we are humble, then we are not proud. Pride, humility. Humility, pride. The writer of the first reading also tells us today, the greater you are, the more you should behave humbly. It is a great challenge for the great to attain humility, but even so it is for the more simple, that they don't fall into the trap of being proud of their humility. A truly humble person will see themselves as being proud, not humble. If any of us here today claim to be humble, then we are likely already blinded by our own pride. Brothers and sisters, if we are honest with ourselves, we will see that the hardest virtue to attain is humility, and that all the sins that we commit come as a result of our unchecked pride. How many of us, if we were invited to that wedding feast that Jesus speaks about in the Gospel, wouldn't want to sit up close to where the bride and groom are? Luckily, these days seats are normally pre-allocated, with table arrangements up on a billboard and a name tag at each seat, so the chance of being asked to move is not like in Jesus' day. But that won't stop our internal or external grumblings when out on the foyer billboard we see that we've been allocated less than desirable seating. If we are honest with ourselves, we can see within ourselves the desire to be important, to be near the hosts, to be recognized, to be acknowledged. If we go back to the Gospel of reading, we see all the guests vying for those top spots near the leading Pharisee. I guess it would be reasonable to assume that in giving this parable, that Jesus had taken the lowest seat in the house of this Pharisee. Having taken a lower seat than those vying for influence and opportunity, Jesus taught firstly through his example what he then explains through his parable. If he was at the head of the table when telling people to be happy with the other end, he would have fallen into the same vain hypocrisy of the religious leaders at the time. It is interesting, brothers and sisters, how Jesus frequently teaches us how to be by showing us the example of how he is, whether it be through the example of his loving and merciful kindness, his wise words, his execution of true justice, his prudent choices. Jesus doesn't say, learn from me to be wise or prudent or loving or just. In fact, the only time in the Gospels that Jesus speaks to us in these terms is when he says, learn from me, for I am meek and humble of heart. And in this, true humility is the source of all the other virtues. If we could but learn to follow Jesus in this one virtue, then we would obtain all the others as well. So, brothers and sisters, Jesus wants us to learn to be like him, who is meek and humble of heart, who in today's gospel didn't vie for the better or more influential positions or seats near the leading Pharisee and other attendees. He was simply happy to be there in their presence. Having shown them the way of humility, he then encourages them to take the big step from humility to love. He tells them not just to invite those who can repay the gesture, but to invite those who had no means of paying back. As for the Pharisees of his time, so too it applies to us here today. In this world gone mad where pride is number one and your worth is dictated by your fame, your number of hits, likes, subscribers, etc., etc., how hard it is to be happy to take last place, or even worse, to spend time with those who by the world's standards are nothing. But this is what Jesus asks of us today. Become meek and humble of heart. Take time for others, especially those whom the world define as nothing. And then, having done this, still recognize with humility how proud we still are. Then, perhaps, we may very well receive that repayment he promises when the virtuous rise again.